Okay, lesson 43 is something called capital flows. And the good thing about lesson 43 is that there isn't very much new that we need to learn here. Really, this is just going to be rehashing a number of things that we've already sort of done, just putting some new names to them. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. Capital flows. Well, before we start, we need to understand that capital flow, like I guess sort of makes sense, has to go directions. Flow goes a direction, right? In this case, we're going to be talking about it going two different directions. Capital that's flowing in and capital that's flowing out. And as I define these, again, this may seem a little self-explanatory, but hopefully it'll be clear by the time it's all said and done. First, countries can experience capital inflow. Capital inflow is essentially when foreign funds are moving into a country. So if for some reason other countries want to send their money to you for some reason, they want to put more and more and more money into your country, then you're experiencing inflow. Now, another way to say that, which we've of course already learned, is really that's another way of saying that there's an increase in the demand for your currency. Because remember, if people want your currency, what do they send you in exchange? Lots of their currency. So capital inflow is really just another way of saying an increase in the demand for your currency. Of course, the opposite is called capital outflow. And I put in parentheses another important term here called capital flight. And you can see I've got it circled right here. Capital flight is the same thing as capital outflow. It's just very severe capital outflow. And it's often the term we use when we talk about current events. That is when foreign funds are moving out of a country, or generally we associate that with a decrease in the demand for that nation's currency. Why does that happen? We're going to get to that in just a second. But generally speaking, we need to know what these two terms mean. Inflow means that money's coming into your country, usually because there's a demand for your currency. Outflow is when money is flowing out of your country, often associated with less demand for your currency. Now, if you put those two things together, you get something called your net capital flow. And your net capital flow really is just the sum of capital inflow and outflow for a nation. So obviously all nations experience some inflow and some outflow. But the net capital flow is putting those two things together. So yes, everybody experiences some money going in and some money going out. But if you have a lot more coming in, then you would say you have a positive capital flow. If you have a lot more going out than coming in, you'd have a negative capital flow. More often than not, they'll refer to inflow and outflow as opposed to your overall flow, but it's good to just mention it. Okay, quickly, what causes capital inflow? Well, what causes people to demand more of your currency? Well, we already know some of the answers. The two biggest answers are things like higher interest rates and low rates of inflation. If those things exist in your country, people have a reason to send money your way, right? Inflation means your goods are cheaper. Higher interest rates means they're going to get more return on their investments when they put it into your country. Again, this is really just review. It's just getting a different term out there. The idea, instead of saying that we're demanding your currency, we're saying that we're going to flow money into your country. Now, the one sort of new idea I want to talk about here is this part here, causes of capital outflow. Well, obviously the opposite of inflow causes is also true, lower interest rates and high inflation. But very specifically, I want to mention this: political instability. One of the greatest reasons why money tends to flow out of a country, in addition to interest rates and inflation and all those things, is because of political instability. People who are investing money want certain things. The most common thing that they want is a good return on their money. But second to that, they also want to know that there are rules. Investors feel very good about rules. Knowing what's what, knowing that if you sign a contract that it's going to be honored, knowing that if you lend money to someone that it's going to be repaid. The problem is when there's political instability in a country, when the government doesn't have a good control of the country, the rule of law, the things that business people count on to make deals, to guarantee that everybody holds up their fair share of a bargain go out the window. And so investors become much, much more cautious about putting their money into a country. And in many cases, they actually pull it out. That's why political instability is so often associated with capital outflow. And again, I put in this definition here, causes investors to fear that things like rule of law and the ability to pay back debt are compromised. People just don't want to put their money where they can't know for sure that there are actual rules and regulations around that money. You probably wouldn't, for that reason, give your money to a bookie that you're going to have for retirement because there's not a lot of rules around sports gambling. However, you would put it in a 401k or with an investment house because you know those things, there's lots of rules and lots of regulations and lots of security for your money. So again, one of the biggest issues that we have that causes outflow or capital flight is political instability. As a current event, particularly today, Russia, because of the conflict in the Ukraine, is experiencing a good deal of capital outflow or capital flight. And there's an article back on the course homepage that I'd like you to look at, as well as a discussion forum where we're going to expand on the issue of political instability. But for the purposes of a free response question, just know political instability means capital outflow or less demand for your currency. Okay, just to make sure that we're okay with this, I want to do one practice problem. Hopefully, again, you've already done this problem, 2002B number 3. It says country X has a flexible exchange rate, an international capital mobility, political turmoil outside of country X generates capital flow into country X. All right, now again, if you haven't done this problem, take a minute, stop, and do it. Let's start with part A. Using a correctly labeled graph of the foreign exchange market, explain the impact of capital flow on the international value of country X. Okay, so in this case, what's happening is there's political problems outside of country X. So just as political problems inside of a country will cause capital outflow, political problems other places will cause inflow into your country because you now all of a sudden look like a safe place. Remember, when it comes to exchange rates, it's not always about what's happening in your country. It's often about what's happening in other places as well. So in this case, because the problems are outside of country X, where is money going to go? It's going to flow into country X. And so as we look at this graph, now they didn't specifically tell us what the name of the currency was, so we can't do that. We're going to keep our answer generic here. Our x-axis, the quantity of country X's currency. Our y-axis, the exchange rate. And of course, we know demand for country X's currency is going to increase because the other places simply aren't safe bets anymore. All right, and then part B. There's our question again, and here's part B. For country X, explain the effect of the change in the international value of its currency on each of the following. Okay, well, we just discovered that country X's currency appreciated in value, and they want to know how it's going to affect exports and imports into and out of country X. Well, and again, we've done this before. This is good review. Because the value has appreciated for country X, exports will decrease because their goods are now, or country X's goods are now more expensive than they used to be to others. However, imports will increase because, again, because the currency of country X appreciated, other nations' goods and services are now less expensive. Okay, please return to the course homepage and complete the remaining activities for this lesson.